Welcome to Soul Night Live, number 60. Tonight, my guest is Jeff Sipe.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You look like you're sitting in a Christmas card there. That looks good.
That's joy to the world, joy to Zambi.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to turn the volume up a little.
All right. Yeah.
I reach into the other realm.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time to drop by and chat today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the music you've been part of for so many years. So I thought it was a great chance to stop and kind of talk about your career and what you've been up to lately as well. So, how have you been spending your days in this
Wow.
I want to say post-COVID era. I wish I could say that yet, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it really seems like 2 or 3 years since normal. You know?
Yeah, I know it.
A year ago this time, we were doing some really cool things.
I know it. We were playing out a year ago, and then had I known it was going to grind to a halt in March, I probably would have squeezed a couple more in.
Right. Yeah, with a sense of urgency. Yeah,
absolutely.
But no, I've been the first couple of months. I was kind of in a different kind of a zone. I didn't really know what to do.
I don't think any of us did, and as much as I wanted to do music, it seemed rather trivial in the grand scheme of things. But
yeah,
I also realized pretty quickly that it was the medicine that my soul needed. And even sitting around and recording demos or whatever, was better than nothing. Just working on being a better guitar player. I can always do that. So
yeah,
it's been an interesting year of growth. I figured if I'm going to come out of this lockdown, I want something to show for it.
Yeah, sure.
Some new music and
have you been able to compose and get more creative than normal, or?
No, I think I got, I always have my moments. I think I don't know. It kind of depends. I kind of write when I feel the need. It's like, I'm not somebody that just writes every week and throws it on a pile. It's almost like what I write is meant to be played live eventually. Yeah. So, I don't want to make the pile too big or you start forgetting about good stuff. So, But this year it's like I made a resolution to just demo a song every week. And and it's just a simple drum loop. I don't have some elaborate, pre-programmed arrangement going, but I have a band and I could easily give it to them.
Send me some of your some of your tunes. Maybe pick one that you think I might be able to contribute to. I'm set up to record at my house. So
that would be cool. Well, maybe I could, have it's like basically just an elaborate click, for lack of a better word. Just some, but it's solid, so it'd be easy to slip something in there underneath it. So I'll let you know. Let me build up a few more and write one with you in mind, and we'll go from there. So far, I've written one that sounds like Nile Rodgers jamming with King Crimson, and this week I did sort of a spaghetti Western surf pastiche. So with 12-string guitars, sounds like something right out of the 1960s or something. So this week, who knows? It's always something different though.
Right. Well, a year ago I was playing with O'Teal and getting ready for some tours. We had done the Denver gig, and that went off really well. And so he had called us for a rehearsal in February. Things were still, the virus really hadn't hit in terms of the news anyway. We didn't really find out until March, So I took in the opportunity to go see my mom, who lives in Louisiana down near Shreveport. So for her birthday, we went down there and surprised her. And the very next week when I came back from that trip, everything was on lockdown. So I got to see her just the last few days before everybody was starting to take this seriously.
Yeah.
But
good timing.
Good timing. But O'Teal had 3 major tours lined up throughout the year. So all that was, down the drain.
And this was the O'Teal band, is that it?
O'Teal and Friends.
Okay, yeah. And who else was part of the entourage?
The great percussionist Weedy,
mm-hmm.
and the fantastic singer Alfreda Gerald.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the core of the band, and that was looking really good. We were going to play the New Orleans Jazz Festival and all over the place. Full Western tour as well. So I got busy after like I say, after a couple months, I started thinking, all right, I'm going to set myself up to record here and see if I can be uh, stay busy recording and being creative and providing some drum tracks to some friends. So Craig Erickson, the great guitar player, he hired me to do his record, and we're just finishing up the last song on his record now. And everybody go check out Craig Erickson, guitar player. He's amazing. Um, Sarah Siskind, she lives here in Brevard, and we hooked up and played and recorded at Echo Mountain Recording Studio in Asheville with Daniel Kimbrough on bass and Mike Seal on guitar. And the four of us recorded her album with her. It's called Modern Appalachia.
Oh, nice.
And she got Bill Frisell to play on 2 tracks.
Ooh, okay.
So that's a dream come true for me, to be on the same record with Bill Frisell. Because I saw Bill Frisell when I was 18 years old at a place called Pooh's Pub in Boston when I was up there going to Berkeley. I was 18 years old and going to see whoever I could. You know, I saw so many greats there. But Bill was going to school at the time there, and he was one of those musicians everybody was mystified by, because he had an original take, kind of an Appalachian take on bebop. And it was a wonderful Americana harmonic science going on. It was really
I like it when different things merge like that unexpectedly. You know, out of that comes some really unique hybrids.
Yeah.
I like that. I think I was watching a vid on YouTube recently where he was jamming with Ginger Baker. Have you seen that? Maybe 15 years ago or so. And Ginger was just like a pig.
That's Charlie.
He was so happy.
Bass, right? Charlie Hayden.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Ginger's just like, these guys really can play some jazz. Yay.
I got the feeling that's what he wanted to be doing the whole time.
Pretty much. And he just wanted to be taken seriously as a jazz drummer, and, you know, being in the rock thing kind of.
Sure. You remember the Air Force, his big band. That was pretty
wild. Yeah, absolutely. I actually was chatting with his son, Kofi. He was on the show about a month ago, and it was interesting. Yeah. You know, and you guys have, you know, he's played with some guys that you played with as well.
We crossed paths. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He came over and stayed at my house while Hellborg and Shawn Lane and Jonas Hellborg and Kofi Baker were touring. So they needed a place to crash. They came over to my place in Atlanta, and we hit it off and we stayed up playing all kinds of great music. I remember getting stuck on the Keith Jarrett trio. Yeah, and we would just be in awe. You know, we wanted to be able to do that, you know, musically, just go places, swimming in music.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kofi was that was a great experience.
And he's a fantastic drummer. You know, if anybody thinks he just sounds like his dad, you know, they're going to be surprised, because he really didn't pay a lot of attention to his dad's music until he was a grown man. You know, he was into fusion. And, you know, that's
got his own thing going on. Yeah,
definitely did. So yeah, and now he does a Cream tribute. You know, I mean, he's like, well, heck, Jason Bonham does a Zeppelin one. I might as well do a Cream one. And I'm like, hell yeah. And people who don't hear that Cream music covered nearly as much as Zeppelin. You know, there's 100 Zeppelin cover bands for every Cream one, I would think.
Oh yeah, and there's Dread Zeppelin. Zeppelin crosses over to bluegrass.
Sure. It's like, let's
reggae.
Polka Zeppelin, bring it on. Let's do it. So so how you been spending your days lately?
Well, I get up, I have my espresso, make sure the kids are doing good.
Right.
My wife's working full time, and that's a blessing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So I catch up on what's going on during the day, and then I head out to the studio and I put my headphones on, and I have projects that I'm doing currently. Just to go over a list, that I started writing down what I've been doing over the year, and I didn't think I was that busy, but when I look at it, I was pretty busy. Okay. Yeah. So the Sarah Siskind album, Eric Cogden from these parts in Asheville, Bob Creary, my good friend, my oldest friend. I was my first band that I was ever in. He was a couple of years older. He was the guitar player. And so all these years later, 40 years later, we're back together doing some recording, and it's just wonderful.
You're 40 years better.
Yeah, that's right. Thank God. I couldn't hold beat for nothing back then. Chris Cortez, who owns Blue Bamboo Music and Records, he has a label. He's a fantastic guitar player, wonderful musician, and he's got a great label, Blue Bamboo. My friend John Morrow, who is taking his time. Everybody will hear about John Morrow coming up pretty soon. He's got some great music and just slowly getting his catalog together. But I'm really excited about people hearing his stuff. Also, Vince Olagan, the great bass player. He was our first bass player in the Jeff Sipe trio, along with Mike Seal.
Okay.
And he asked me to be a part of his record, Circus Number 9, and it's a bluegrass group, kind of a progressive bluegrass group, all acoustic.
I like that.
Based out of Nashville and Knoxville, and they have some fantastic tunes. So I'm looking forward to that stuff coming out. Tom Guarna, the amazing electric fusion guitar player from New York, sent down a track for me to record on, and that was a blast. Josh Carter, who's a local bluegrass cat from here, been on his record, as well as Bill Stevens' record, Billy Cardine, the lap steel player from Nashville as well, who's in Acoustic Syndicate. He's got an original record coming out, and it's really wild because he's been studying with the great Debashish Bhattacharya, the Calcutta slide guitar player from India.
I know that name.
Who's classically trained. So Billy's got this Appalachian stuff, and then he goes to Calcutta to learn from him and brings it back and writes his own music and mixes it all together.
Microtonal and stuff,
And the phrasing, the rhythmic phrasing is just so beautiful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then working with that project also is the great Paul Hansen, who is the bassoon player, electric bassoon player. And if anybody, everybody should check out Paul Hansen, the electric bassoonist.
Well, bassoon alone is such a unique instrument. Anybody that puts their life in that instrument is a unique person.
Yeah, and he hooks up pedals to it, so he has this beautiful acoustic sound. And then he goes into, I swear, it sounds like Stravinsky meets Hendrix. There's parts when you think for sure it's got to be a guitar,
like some wah-wah bassoon and stuff.
Yeah, envelope filters and just harmonizing. He can change the quality of chords because he has intervals preset. So when he hits a note, he can have a stack of fifths or fourths, or and change the harmonies, minor and major, as he goes along. It's really
any kind of sample and hold where he'll bring up a chord and then solo over the top of it or loop it or whatever.
No, he creates the chords as he goes, and he has these presets so he can hold them, and then he solos over top of it, and then he switches progressions with his pedals.
Right, kind of like I get it. So each pedal's got a certain progression.
I don't know really how he does it, but I invite everybody to go check it out.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Phenomenal. Absolutely. I think he's one of the greatest out there. Carolina Reapers is a group that I'm with. There's the Page brothers, Zach and Andy Page, and Mike Runyon on keyboards, and that's a fusion group, and we enjoy playing some of our favorite fusion stuff together.
So tell me a bit about your roots and what drummers and musicians in general you really were inspired by early on.
Right. I remember the first musician that really blew me away, and I thought, that's something I would love to be able to do. I was watching Johnny Carson with my dad, and Milt Jackson came out and played a marimba solo. Ooh. And I didn't know that his rhythm, and it was like he was a drummer on a keyboard, but it was all laid out in front of him. It just blew my mind. I thought that's pretty incredible. And then as a teenager, I fell in love with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Carl Palmer had the biggest drum set, 2 gigantic gongs and timpanis and everything. And he made sure he hit everything there.
Remember that solid chrome kit he had that weighed about 1,000 pounds?
That was the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fell in love with that. And that's while I was in Germany. 6th grade, I started playing drums. And then 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I was in Frankfurt, Germany, in the band. And then when I came to the States, 14 years old, starting high school, I met a bass player named Emmett Ingersoll. He invited me over, and we listened to Bitches Brew. Oh. And I heard American electric jazz for the first time. And that was a game changer because the drums were really active. It was a mixture of jazz and progressive rock, hard hitting, fast stuff, which is exciting for a young guy. And
Very cool. Yeah.
yeah, so all roads lead to from Bitches Brew. I started noticing the players on that record had their own records, and their guys had their own records. So it just fractaled out.
Oh yeah. I mean, just that's kind of like the what's the word I want to use? The fountainhead
Yeah,
of fusion. You know, you start there and check out everybody on that record, and
yeah,
you have a pretty good idea.
yeah, yep. And so I went out from there and forward from there, and then I decided to go back from there. And Miles worked with Charlie Parker
Sure.
and some of the early bebop guys. So that moving to America as a 14-year-old, listening to music, having a drum set, and being allowed to practice. Mom and Dad, they supported me, so I feel real lucky. I was in a safe environment, great friends, nice neighborhood. I was allowed to play and practice and go out and play with friends, and it was a real free time. So I feel blessed. I was real fortunate.
So are you pretty much self-taught, or was there like a kind of a particular?
It's a mixed bag. At first, I was grabbing everything I could, taking lessons from everybody I could. So it's kind of like there's a handful of teachers in my life who I studied with for 6, 8, or 8 lessons, just short chunks of time to get a body of work to work on and practice. And so, like Dave Palomar, he was the young Air Force jazz band drummer in the DC area. And I took 6 lessons from him, and that was all about technique and how to listen to rhythm and how to sing rhythm. And so those fundamentals I'm still working on today, all these years later.
Sure.
And that was in 1977. So Dave Palomar was crucial. Jack Bell from the Atlanta Symphony, he taught me some technique and warm-up patterns that I practice to this day. My friend Lee Venters, great drummer who took my spot in Aquarium Rescue Unit.
Yeah.
He was a mentor and still is. He's a maniac, genius, rhythmicist. So along the way, together with finding musicians that were drummers that were accessible and working on that stuff, I made a commitment to transcribing rhythm from records and things that I was interested in. So I was able to develop my reading and my writing as well as my practicing all at the same time. I think so. It's self-taught, yes, and formally taught also. Bill Noreen was great. Also Bob Kaufman, fantastic drummer and a great teacher from Berkeley. He taught me a lot too. And I only had him for 1 semester, but I'm still working on his stuff too.
Quite a semester, huh?
Oh yeah, just packed with good stuff. You get seeds. Everybody's got some life experience or some wisdom, and you take those little seeds and you put them in you, and through practice you water those seeds and they grow into something.
Yep.
But so I've been just paying attention along the way and grabbing stuff that I was interested in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Funny thing, my band opened for your trio about 12 or 13, maybe 15 years ago now.
Remember you mentioned that, yeah.
Do you remember a place in Knoxville called the Grotto where they
Not sure. Yeah.
stucco on the walls to make it look like you're in a cave or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was where it was at. Yeah.
Right.
It was a fun day though.
That's a vortex. A lot of great musicians there.
Yeah. Well, Knoxville's a cool town, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't think that club's there anymore now. I think it's just a restaurant or something, but nothing good lasts forever.
Right.
So what were some of the early bands that you were in, and what kind of were you looking to play some fusion from the get-go, or did you kind of work your way up with typical classic rock and blues, that kind of jazz?
At first it was all about trying to emulate Tony Williams, Billy Cobham, Michael Walden, Jack DeJohnette, Lenny White, and Steve Gadd, and Harvey Mason, and Garibaldi. That bubble of awesomeness was what I wanted to be, or be influenced by. And I remember kind of sending a prayer, you know, like, I would like to aspire to this. I'd like to be comfortable, you know, in a career playing music like this. And so I think the powers that be heard me and laid out the rest of my life according to my little prayer of intention, you know.
Yeah.
And so so grabbing from those guys, trying to use what they did, but put it in a personal way. Yeah. But those are the shoulders, those are the giants whose shoulder I'm on right now.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. You know?
Thank you.
Play with some, you know, some of the best. So yeah, definitely.
I've been lucky along the way for sure. But you know, I think when I look back on it, it's joy and intention that open those are the keys that unlock those doors. And people of like mind, you know, see that and they want to play with you because you have that same excitement or that same curiosity or that same a wonder or the same commitment to art, you know.
Yeah. So what was like your first serious group that you were a part of?
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, it was called It's Us, and it was my friend Bob Creary, who I mentioned, Steve Kaplan, rest in peace. And it was 2 guitars and drums. We never found a bass player. So for 3 years we played together just as the trio with 2 guitars and drums. That was the first thing. Then I went to Berkeley and I joined a group called Winter with Marty Weintraub, who was the conductor, and Steve Vai was the guitar player.
Oh, he's pretty good.
Yeah. And let me tell you, man, he's a cool cat too.
He is. He really is.
Short story. We were playing together, and times were pretty tough. We were living in Back Bay, Boston, and poor musicians. You know, we didn't have much. I went over to visit him once, and he said, "Man, you hungry?" And you know, I was honest with him. Said, "Yeah, you know, I haven't eaten lately." You know,
right?
Look, come on in the kitchen. And he opens up the cupboard, and they're all empty except for one box of macaroni and cheese. And he took it out and made it for me while we talked music. And so, cool cat.
Good
that was when he was 15 hours a day, 12 hours, 15 hours a day studying and transcribing Zappa music.
Oh, yeah.
And so one day he came to me at the 5th floor Berkeley dorm on Mass Ave. He knocks on the door. He goes, "I've got Zappa's number. I want to call him. I'm really nervous. I need you to come with me." And so, all right, we went down to the end of the hallway where there's a payphone on the wall. 10 cents. He calls, and Gail, Zappa's wife, answers. And she explains that Zappa's on the road in Europe for the next 3 months. But be sure to call back because he'd love to talk to you. Oh. And it was such a great feeling when he hung up the phone. He was on cloud 9.
Okay,
you know, he was encouraged. So they got in touch. Zappa invited him to send his transcriptions, and then Zappa would read them and red ink the parts that were wrong and send them back. So I was there with Steve, looking on his desk, and he's got his Panasonic tape recorder and his cup of coffee and his cigarette and his transcription, you know, paper and his pen, and that was his world, you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, he did such a great
job.
So
committed to it.
I'm sure even Frank was amazed when he started singing.
Yeah, it wasn't long after that he got the call to come out and be Frank's musical director.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Proud moment. Yeah. So after Winter,
your foot in the door at the Zappa band.
He told me that he liked my drumming because he heard a tape that we had done. That group went into the studio and recorded one song, and there was a section in the song where there was quintuplets floating across the pulse. You know how Zappa loves that.
He loves those quintuplets. Yeah.
Even spaced odd groupings floating through time.
Sure. So
he said, "That's great. Not a lot of drummers can do that." And so when I heard that back, it was encouragement.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And after that, let's see, I was in a group called Vermilion Sands, which was a acoustic guitar, electric bass, and drums, and it was just fusion. We practiced probably every week, 5 nights a week for 4 hours, and we had 3 gigs inside of probably 2 years. We were just a practice band who, had a few gigs
Right.
before it dissolved. I was in a country band in Berkeley. The first gig I ever played, when I got to Boston, was in a country band, Lucky Southern. And our first gig was at a mental institution, one of the oldest in the country, in fact, just outside of Boston, up on a big hill. There's a brick, iron gates, big courtyard. We
Looked
get
like
into
a haunted house or something almost.
It was amazing. It was surreal. It was like a dream. We got in there, opened the gates, and the guards were there. The courtyard was empty. They were going to wait for us to set up before they let the inmates into the courtyard to enjoy some music and a sunny day.
Yeah.
And so we get there and we're setting up the drums, and my good friend Ewan Henriksen, a conga player who's in Norway. He was one of my good buddies back then. We were setting up, and I notice a voice, and I look up, and I see 2 hands and a nose sticking out of these bars, looking down into the courtyard while we're setting up. And I said, "Hey, come on down. We're going to be playing some music." And he said, "Oh, I would, but they're afraid I'm going to hurt somebody." And that was our first experience in there. And then a lot of other things happened that day that was really crazy. No pun intended. That was my first gig.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very special.
Not quite San Quentin, but getting there.
Wow, it was like another dimension, really.
I can imagine. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
What did they enjoy it?
Some really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it felt like it might have been a gift for them, but it was a gift for me too. Yeah.
Well, just to give that gift and see it received so, warmly is.
Yeah.
Really,
When I left Boston, I went down to Atlanta, and I hooked up with a band called Redline. It was a top 40 band. We played the Carlos McGee circuit in Buckhead and all around Atlanta. That's where I met Simon Carter, rest in peace, great bass player, and Vance Taylor, incredible piano player, musical director at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta.
Sure.
They taught me so much. And after that, that's when I met Dan Wall, great piano player, who's played with John Abercrombie and a bunch of folks. Mm-hmm. Well, he and his wife, Carol Vito, invited me to play a wedding in North Georgia. I was so excited. I get to play with this great piano player and get $100 out of it, It's 25 or 26 years old. And so I get up to North Georgia, and I'm setting up my drums, and it's a wedding, and everything's peaceful. It's very nice. And in walks, everybody set up, and Bruce hadn't arrived yet. And suddenly Bruce arrives, dressed down. I mean, everybody else's ties, and he's just dressed way down. He's got a young man helping him set up. He's got a red Princeton amp about the size of a briefcase.
Right.
And his guitar, not in a case, just wires all over it, and just plugged in. So we started talking, and then it's time to go. So, it's time to start playing. We started playing some smooth jazz, totally appropriate for the wedding in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
If you can imagine. And then all of a sudden, as Dan Wall is playing, he looks over at Bruce and gives him the nod. Go ahead and take a solo. And Bruce turns up and starts playing his galactic weirdness, and I had no idea who Bruce was, what he was about. All I thought was, this is the most inappropriate madness I've ever heard. Unprofessional. Oh my God, what the hell is he doing?
All about
he was
context.
destroying the scene, Yeah. And then I look back at Dan Wall, who's laughing his ass off. He's trying to harmonize with Bruce. All the out notes that Bruce is hitting, he's trying to fit into a chord and make it relevant you know,
Right.
to chord changes, and that was their relationship. I realized, okay, they have a special relationship going on. I don't know what this is. But Bruce called me the next day and asked me if I'd join him to play at the Harvest Moon in Atlanta. When I got there, there was about 20 people on stage.
Wow.
And it was the most out because there were no songs. It was just go. And he had a badass rhythm section with him, Randy Honey and Bill Hatcher, just killing it, and Ricky Keller, a bunch of others. So it was really fun, and it was in the pocket, and it was adventurous, and it was strong and weird. And about the third song into it, it got so weird. I looked over at Randy and I said, I think I found my calling. And he looked at me and smiled and said, I think you have too.
Yeah.
And so that was my meeting with Bruce.
Okay. Well, that's good. Okay. Well, cool.
He guessed my birthday, right on the money.
Right. Did he W the apartment? What's the story behind that?
Well, Prophet Omega is a self-taught evangelist preacher from Nashville. Nashville. Who had a Sunday sermon on the radio, and it was way left of the dial. But a lot of the Nashville musicians loved it and thought he was such a character. They would record these on their cassettes and pass them around to their friends. And so there was a pocket of fans of Prophet Omega. But Prophet Omega lived in apartment Q258 on the Old National Highway and the Kent Mount apartment buildings, apartment Q, building Q.
Right.
And so he would advertise that in his sermons, to come down, to worship with him and bring some money. And, he's a real character. Well, one day, Bruce and I were on our way to play at the Planet Earth in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he looked at me one day and he said, on the way up there, he looked at me, he goes, that's it. That's who you are. I've been thinking about your stage name, who you really are. You're the apartment. And I don't know. It didn't mean anything to me. I have no idea what, Bruce has a nickname or a moniker for everybody.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right. Yeah, Jeff Moser was the Reverend Moser. O'Teal's O'Teal from Egypt. Matt Mundy was Matt Mundy. He had to say his name 3 times.
Yeah.
He worked with a guy named called Can of Worms. But I got stuck with an address,
Well, that's unique. You're not going to forget that anytime soon.
Yeah. Funny, I was playing with Jonas and Shawn, Jonas Hellborg and Shawn Lane.
Yeah.
We were on a European tour, and our record had just come out. And the title of it was Jonas Hellborg, Shawn Lane, Apartment Q258, or APT period dash Q258. Uh-huh. And so when we got to Europe, they didn't know it was a live drummer. They thought it was like the Yamaha drum machine Q58 or something. They couldn't figure it out.
That was the model number or whatever.
It was like, what? What is this? So, yeah.
Wow, that's wild. Well, I want to talk a bit about you hooking up with them in a minute here. We're kind of lucky to be in the South, and this is really kind of the heart of what I would consider the jam scene. And I was kind of curious if you could kind of talk a bit about how it grew over the years. I'm thinking that stuff like the Horde Festival had a big hand in kind of blowing it up to the mega proportions that it's become in the last 25 years. Am I right?
Yeah, jam, you think about the word jam.
Improv.
Jam, yeah, it's improv, right? Doesn't matter the genre, but in the hippie jam world, the Grateful Dead world, and
Allman Brothers, the Dead.
Yeah, right.
They were kind of the forefathers of the whole thing.
Yeah, Little Feat,
love them.
Some of these things, they were truly jamming, but it was in the hippie vein, or it wasn't the jazz vein.
No, it wasn't particularly harmonically uptown. It was just,
it was feel good.
Yeah,
feel good, right?
Very diatonic for the most part.
Yeah, but the Horde tour did allow for a festival of a lot of these bands to come together, and then a scene could be identified. Otherwise, it was all individual people doing their thing. But then now all of a sudden there's a bubble of groups or pocket of groups that people liked. And the Horde tour was only 8 days on the first one. And the second Horde tour was quite a lot more.
Yeah, and am I right that John Popper's the one that got that going?
Yeah, he was instrumental in it. Yeah.
I thought so. Kind of like Perry Farrell and his Lollapalooza, but jam style.
Yeah, Dave Fry, who does the Lock-In Festival.
Okay, yeah, super successful one. But would you say that was kind of a catalyst that really kind of unified these bands?
I agree with you as I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and remind folks some of the bands that were on the bill with Aquarium Rescue Unit.
Yeah.
Who else were you playing with?
Remember Morphine, the sax player, the trio?
Yeah.
Right. He was on that.
Like Dave Matthews and Spin Doctors and
Dave Matthews, right? Yeah, and Medeski Martin Wood.
Oh yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
Which of those bands did you feel a kinship with the most?
Oh, when Aquarium Rescue Unit was out and on the road, we were 300 days a year on the road.
Wow.
We really tore it up. And the same kind of schedule with Leftover Salmon. So we met so many different bands, and we wouldn't have been able to see them if we weren't touring, because we bumped into them on the road or opening up, or
or whatever.
Yeah. But I think it's such a big family. There's so many like minds in there. It feels like one giant band sometimes.
I can see that, and there's just this kinship that you don't find with other genres. Like I'm a big prog rock guy, and I kind of envy the jam scene. It's like I wish we could be as tight and loving, but we're not.
Well, one thing I think the jam world, by nature, the music is not a competitive.
No, it's very opening and welcoming. While prog rock is something you've got to kind of shed on. You don't just jam on close to the edge. You got to go learn it and play it correctly. So it doesn't really open itself up to the kind of fun quality that the jam scene has. There's not a lot of improv. It's more about nailing these intricate arrangements.
Yeah, and when I think about the jam world meets the acoustic bluegrass world, there's an overlap there, because I think there's somewhat same sensibilities in the soloing. I don't know, maybe it's the acoustic nature of it, or maybe the more gentle nature of bluegrass, although bluegrass can be fierce, of course, but the acoustic sound quality makes it easy listening, even if you're playing super shredded.
Ripping it up, yeah.
Yeah, so the sonic envelope, I think, helps marry the jam band too. Plus, there was a generation of jam musicians who started practicing bluegrass really serious and brought the hippie element into the bluegrass as they were learning the bluegrass, the younger generations, the Leftover Salmon and String Cheese. And some of the first bluegrass groups to use drum set to the fullest, not just tip tap,
right,
green beat, but they full on drums.
Now, each one of these groups, I mean, improv is kind of at the heart. Everybody, they have certain structured songs that can be split open and expanded each night in a different way. How do you feel about the nature of improv? Do you feel, I guess my question is, what's the best motivation for it? Is it I have to get somewhere personally, or I'm going to share this wonderful stuff with the audience? It's like sometimes I think some improv can be a little self-serving. So I'm just curious your thoughts on the approaches to it and how to be honest about it. And
well, there you go. That's it. How to be honest about it. We're improving right now, but there's a mutual respect. There's a give and take. There's a yin and yang. There's a question and answer, or there's time to talk and there's time not to talk. So it's the same thing. You can improvise in language, and since music is a language, the same rules apply. Consider this: when you're playing with any other musician, two or more people get together, and you're improvising, there's always four choices that you have to contribute to the conversation.
Mhm.
You can say exactly what the other person is saying and mimic them, like unison.
Right.
Or you can do the exact opposite and wait and just do the things they're not doing. Or you can play independently, completely. No matter what they're doing, you're going to do your own thing. Or you can lay out and just be quiet. And so that's the same thing in our conversation. If you were trailing me and saying every word that I did right behind me, that's
Like, stop that.
that would get really annoying after a while.
Right.
You know?
You got the ideas of your own.
Yeah, so I think those universal laws apply as lessons in music that we can apply to real life.
Sure. And are there times where it feels like, I think if you improvise every night, the Dead's a good example. I'd say about a third of them were brilliant, and the other two-thirds, they didn't ever get the landing gear up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, there might have been some things in the way of that.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I just think every day's different, and you're not
Yeah.
going
Well, if you need a clear mind and a willingness to be sharp in an improvisation. Now, if everybody's on their separate trip and you improvise, it's going to sound like that. And some of it can be magic. I saw the Dead twice, and both times I witnessed magic. But as a young musician and a practicing drummer, I ran away from that music as far as I could. Things I could never escape it. All my friends were listening to it.
Sure.
So eventually, I ended up in a position to be able to play with some of those cats, and did 3 tours with Phil Lesh.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting how life comes around. The things that you try to run away from, they're waiting for you around the corner.
And sometimes when you immerse yourself in them and really dissect the music, you get a whole new appreciation for it.
That's it. Yeah, there are layers to that music that I didn't take the time to understand before I had a reason to really go deep into it. Mm-hmm. And so the nature of improv is that it's a language and is to be respected as one.
Would you say that there are some nights where of course, you come out of there walking on air? Are there other nights where you're just like, we tried, but...
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, and if you're really, really trying and your intention is to be 100% there, then it's real subjective. And when you listen back to it, if it's been recorded, a bad feeling night may end up sounding great.
Well,
or the reverse. You might have really a lot of confidence about a performance, and then you listen back to it, it's not all that.
Well, sometimes you can't tell. I mean, I've learned, to not judge a gig the minute I walk off the stage, to give it a little time to kind of settle and then kind of look back on it a day or two later. And sometimes just, I don't know, the way it sounds on stage is awful, and then out front it sounds great, and the audience doesn't know a thing. They're having a great time. So it really can depend.
And I think as a player, you have to trust that everybody is a professional and doing their thing. So you don't have to. I have to remind myself I don't have to overcompensate. I have to realize that the sound engineers are doing their job, and if I play at a whisper, it's still going to be represented in the room. So.
How different did it get? I've noticed that some jam bands have a certain, I would call, contour to their jams. You know what I mean? It all builds to this fevered pitch where the guitar player is up at the 22nd fret hitting a high note, and boom, we're all dancing again. You know what I mean? This tension and release is somewhat predictable sometimes.
Well, yeah, it's the journey of life, tension and release. It's in every day.
Yeah.
Every week that we're alive, and so it's the transitions that make make it magic. Like, change is inevitable, but how you get from one change to the new change, if it's graceful, fantastic. If it's clumsy, it's not so good. Okay. Yeah. Grace through transition is the goal in life and in music. So how to study transitions, when to give it up, and when to take it forward, when to carry the ball, and when to pass it.
So can you talk a bit more about playing with Bruce and kind of what he brought to your mindset?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's been through the Bruce boot camp,
Yeah. And this
Bruce
is
Hampton
for,
boot
just
camp.
for anybody that's out there that doesn't know, this is Southern music legend Colonel Bruce Hampton that we're talking about. Kind of
Sure.
musical sensei to the South, I would say.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
say so. He was a real character. I've never known anybody like him, and everybody who's met him probably says the same thing.
absolutely. You know, we had a show about him a couple weeks ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was fun to take a peek at.
Yeah, we got to keep that legend alive.
Yeah, and that new biography that Jerry Grillo just wrote is coming out right away.
Just
So
put my order in for the book as a pre-order.
yeah, I suggest you all check it out if you love Bruce.
Yeah,
fantastic. This book.
I'm about to learn a lot, but you know, I spent 34 years with him, off and on, and I only know a fraction of him, you know. But the guy that I got to know was a clairvoyant, brilliant mathematician, um, kind of a combination of a scoundrel and an enlightened
Rogue.
He was a friend most of all, because he took the time to get into my head, and everybody he met, he takes the time to get into your head, ask you questions about yourself, and playfully and artfully get you to think about some things that you may not have thought about, like how you view yourself, how you see the world, fundamental questions, but in a playful way. So he allowed for a beautiful playground with music and art and conversation. Every day we'd have conversations, and a lot of the time they were philosophical. And at the end of the day, everything boiled down to intention and breath. Just seems to me, and seems to us, that there's only those two things that you can control in life. You know, you can control your breathing and your heart rate if you meditate.
Yeah,
and you can control your intention.
Yeah.
Everything else is just flying around, you know.
Sure.
But that's a way to get through, honestly, in music and in life. Keep the intention pure, keep your breath, keep your center.
Sure.
Right.
Breathing's so important. I don't think people give it enough credit. You know, just breathing deeper and slower, and it's like breathing in calm every time you do it. You know, and
in with the good, out with the bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that's the mantra, then I think it really does help.
And it's really the simplest thing you can do, but I think people underestimate it or don't give it enough thought, you know. And
even talking about it, I want to take a big breath. You know?
Yeah.
Speaking of breath, there's a project I'm doing right now called Breath. And we're two into the series. What they are is 30-second short videos with audio of a player or an artist doing their thing, and at the end of it, taking a big breath and releasing it. And so the idea is to create a series of short videos that are kind of a minute or a half a minute, just to be with something that takes you away from your world, takes away from all the problems or, you know, the heaviness, and you see this beautiful music and a video and then a release. So the first one was done with Bernard Purdy and Jeff Coffin and Jason Hahn and Scott Swimmer and myself. Wow. Scott Swimmer is the project leader, and Scott Swimmer, he started this festival called Drum Strong, and it's a cancer benefit every year based in Charlotte. And over the years, he's gotten to know all these amazing drummers because he's reached out to them to hear their story on their experiences with cancer and their willingness to contribute and be a part of this cancer research through drumming and raising awareness through drumming. So we have Steve Gadd on this. I never thought in a million years I'd be in a project with Steve Gadd.
Sweet for you. I mean, wow.
Yeah, but you know, he's a beautiful, humble cat and a well-intended dude. So he's lending his talents to the project as well. So Breathe. It's a series of short videos intended to relax people.
Okay. Where do you catch these videos at?
These are going to be posted on YouTube.
Okay.
We're in our second video, in the middle of producing our second one right now. So I'll let you know, and we'll post when it's ready.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, let me know. Couple questions in the chat room. My friend Kevin Andrews, who you might know, says,
Hey, Kevin?
Yeah, are you still doing the pickup truck jams around Brevard?
No, not because, we started to get a crowd, and I realized drawing a crowd in a pandemic is the absolute wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
So it was fun for a while until we realized we shouldn't be doing this.
Just wait for now. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we'll wait for a vaccine and we'll get the pickup truck jams going again.
Aaron Ralston, a fellow drummer, says, "Hey, Shawn, Sipe, one of the most underrated drummers out there. Loved his playing with ARU." So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a thrill for me. Playing with Shawn was like flying with another eagle. Like, I remember one time we were playing and we were in the middle of a jam. I don't know how we got there, but it was an organic thing. And we're playing at 1,000,000 miles an hour and it's just feeling good, like the music's playing us. And I looked at him and I felt like two eagles flying in the air together. It's awesome. It was a great feeling.
We're talking Shawn Lane here, in case.
Talking Shawn Lane there, yeah.
No.
Meanwhile, Jonas is like, he's holding us from flying too high. He's got us, and we're just
like a kite on a string.
Yeah,
that's great. So tell us a bit about how you came to hook up with. Well, I guess you knew Bruce already, and then how did ARU get put together?
Okay, yeah. After that wedding, I played and met Bruce. I started playing with Bruce in every gig that I played with Bruce was a different group of players, but some came and some left and some stayed. And so before Aquarium Rescue Unit was established, it was maybe 15 different musicians and maybe 3 different bands: the Arkansas Travelers, the Arkansas Florists. He'd make up different names, every year it was a different name, or sure. Every gig was a different name. So Charlie Williams, the great guitar player, he was among the team, and Jeff Mosier. And I knew Oteil from the Top 40 band, and we were living together up in Tucker, just north of, in Norcross, just north of Atlanta. And so I knew the Burbridge brothers from a Top 40 band that I played in called Knee Deep with Dan Hofflinger and Sam Guest. So I was playing with Bruce all these crazy gigs, and I was playing on these super strict Top 40 exact arrangements. And I met the Burbridge brothers. And so I had this band called Mystificus, and it was the Burbridge brothers, myself, and Jimmy Herring. And we practiced in my garage. And one day during the practices, Oteil came in, and he was shuffling around, and he put his bass down. He goes, "Man, I just don't dig this Top 40 scene. I'm going crazy."
Sure.
And I said, "Well, why don't you come out and play with Bruce and me tonight? We're playing at the Point. We play every Monday night, and we just play what we want." And so sure enough, he did. And going into the club, we met Bruce on the sidewalk. And before I could say, "Hey, Bruce, I want you to meet my friend O," and he goes, "Oteil, 24th of August." He nailed his birthday on the day and on the year, and blew him away.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Before he even could say anything. So I brought Oteil to Bruce, and Jimmy Herring as well. He knew that we were playing and really wanted to be a part of it. So I invited him to come in, and they met, and that's how ARU started.
And what year was that?
That was 89.
Okay. 89. And how quickly did you get around to writing and making that first album?
Well, we started playing, and we were doing frat parties and touring, and we had so many different managers.
Was it all original?
What's that?
The tunes you were playing, were they all original at the beginning?
There are some public domain tunes from Bruce's catalog.
Sure.
Okay. Fixing to Die and some of that. David Earl Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it was tunes that Bruce had been playing in previous bands. Okay. You know, he we just reinterpreted, played faster and louder and weirder.
So is that the crux of what's on the debut album? Or were there some songs written specifically for it also?
We had already been touring that stuff and played it, and 1,000 times before the record. That live gig
at the Georgia Theater, right?
Yeah, so we were on 10. We were already just breathing fire, and Billy Bob Thornton we got to meet him, and he directed the thing.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And he's a drummer too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that first album was a great opportunity, and to work with Johnny Sandlin too, the great bass player and engineer who worked with the Allman Brothers. Mm-hmm. He recorded the album, so working with him was fantastic.
Tell us that story you mentioned on your page recently about doing the picture for the album cover.
Sure. Yeah. We went to Nashville.
You were smart to lay down on the floor instead.
I thought, okay, 5-minute photo finish. Yeah, let's get comfortable. Yeah. So they had us in a dark room, and the fish that you see were hanging by strings, and they were painted.
Uh-huh.
And so the photographer had us pose, and he put the props around, hanging the fish, and then he said, "Stay still," and he walked. It was a 5-minute photo finish, and he walked around with light cans and put different gels, colored gels, into light cans. So there were, 300 watt, really bright spotlights. And so he would walk between us and paint green around one person, and he'd keep moving so he didn't get caught on the film.
It's like a long exposure.
Yeah. So only what stayed still got noticed on the film. Meanwhile, he painted it with light, so it's a light painting.
I wondered, because it has this kind of dreamy quality to it, Yeah. How'd they do that?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Where was that done at?
That was in Nashville.
That was in Nashville. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what led to the second album? Was that more stuff that you've been playing live, or did you guys sit down?
After the first record, which was live and a lot of improv on it, the second album offered a unique opportunity for us to get in the studio and not worry about live and just that energy. We could focus and really hone some tunes and arrange some tunes and write some new tunes. So there was a serious effort to get more specific tunes and less jammy. We had specific arrangements and everything. And Chuck Leavell, great keyboard player, was with the Rolling Stones and his own stuff. He came down, and it was really, really fascinating to work with him. He's so talented. But him stepping into the Bruce Hampton world, he didn't really realize how crazy we could get. The first gig he played with us before cutting the album, backstage, he wanted to know the keys that we were going to play. And of course, any musician sitting in, what key is this song in? What style are you going to play? And we looked at him and we go, we don't know yet. We're just going to go out there and play. And so he did. And he was a trooper, and being a superior musician and being able to listen and hear everything, he found his place right away. But it was really a really different world for him.
Yeah. So what led to you guys going on without the Colonel?
The business got crazy. We had a manager that was more of a damager.
Good way to put it.
And so things started eroding when we started going pro. We got a manager and a budget and a tour bus and a schedule, and there were some shenanigans going on. So Matt Mundy, being the pure musician that he is, didn't want to have anything to do with the business. It was all corrupt. And he was seeing some ugly stuff, so he just decided to bail. And 6 months later, Bruce decided he didn't want to be a part of that scene either. And then 6 months after he left, I left because it was turning into something different. You know, all flowers bloom and decay, and we're all good friends now to this day. It rhymed.
Well, you guys did some amazing music in the meantime, and just
Thanks.
I
We
think that,
burned the candle at both ends, man.
yeah. Well, you're young, do it. You know, I mean,
I know.
you only live once.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and that debut album I think is just a cornerstone of the whole jam scene. But you guys were going new places. You know, that whole fusion infusion of fusion.
Right.
You guys different. You know, it gave
Yeah.
you something to appeal to old prog heads like me and fusion cats and stuff.
Well, that's interesting, you know, because we all of us did come from that, except Bruce. He came from blues,
Sure,
like
soul.
strict old blues, you know. And when he played, he was playing random notes when I met him at first. It was just performance art
Sure,
out, man. Had nothing to do with
a key.
yeah, or time or tone or anything.
Sure.
He was like a performance artist. But as by the time he got to the Code Talkers and working with Bobby Lee, he started really getting into playing chords and playing blues and staying in the key and singing. And so he had an evolution as a player, coming from a performance art he didn't know anything about the laws of music to actually, you know, getting into it. Um,
I think the first time I saw you guys was a reunion show at the Georgia Theater 15 years ago. It was before it burnt down, and Bruce was wearing a suit. I think kind of Code Talkers era. So what this? Did you guys
yeah.
do a reunion around that time?
Yeah, we did a handful of reunions over the years. Every few years we got back together again. But O'Teal was coming from Jocko and a bunch of great bass players, and Jimmy was coming from Steve Morris and Alan Holdsworth, and I was coming from all the drummers I mentioned earlier, Peter Erskine and all this. And so there were times when we were playing. I remember one time in particular playing at the Little Five Points pub where we had a Monday night steady gig.
Yeah.
And
There's
it was all performance art. I mean, music was some of it, but there were a lot of antics and craziness going on too.
sure.
But at one point, we were playing so fusion and so, you know, so fusion oriented. Bruce stopped us in the middle of it and turned around and goes, "What? What is this, Berkeley?" And then he started playing the random out
Sure.
crazy stuff, and we all just laughed and joined him.
Yeah.
You know, so we started detuning and playing and just going nuts.
Make it as weird as
But
possible.
Bruce was somebody who we enjoyed putting up on a silver platter, and then he would destroy the whole thing, and then we'd build it up again for him, and it would just dissolve again. We just had it was playful. It was not about any commercial appeal.
No.
It was a joyful noise. We weren't worried about making the money. We were worried about we weren't worried about anything. We were expressing ourselves and growing. He allowed us to be ourselves and develop with no rules, just only conversations on what works and what doesn't, what we like and what we don't, and then reminding us that, you know, you're really not everything you think you are. I mean, after all, as a drummer, I have two pieces of wood and I'm throwing them down and I'm catching them again. You know, I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm not saving the world. I'm not doing
It seems like
anything that's really important. You know, he would
like Bruce
remind us all that we're just enjoying ourselves. You know, don't take yourself too seriously. Take what you do seriously,
well,
not
it's
yourself.
almost like Bruce kind of managed to dispel a lot of follies of our youth early for you guys. You know, because a lot of these things, just maturity will bring to you eventually. You know, it's almost like he focused you guys early on, just
Yeah,
get away from the ego and move on.
that's right. That's right. He wouldn't allow us to have an ego. When he did, he'd laugh at us, and we'd end up laughing
Well,
at
it
ourselves.
seldom makes good music, you know, ego. It's almost like hanging a sign over your head. Look at me. I
Well,
need
that's
attention.
interesting you say that. You know, I think that music is one of the only art forms, maybe the only art form that you can't lie because every note and how you play it reveals your intention. You
Absolutely.
know, if you're playing something beautiful and sensitive, you know, that's that's obvious. You know, if you're playing something to be impressive, you know, that's obvious.
Or if you're
Um,
playing something that's obviously emulates somebody else,
that's
something that,
obvious. You can't lie in music.
well, I almost say, don't get too close to the fire. You're going to get burnt. I mean, it's great to love an artist, but mix it up. Love hundreds of artists. Don't just love a couple, because if you pay too much close attention to one person, you're going to start to pick up their style via osmosis, whether you want to or not.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's why I say take seeds from all those
yeah,
cats you like
yeah.
and then water those. You come up with a jungle, it's yours.
My own jungle rather than somebody else.
Your own jungle.
Yeah, who wants somebody else's? That's no fun. You
Right
can
on.
grow your own. Um, so I love seeing you guys play with John McLaughlin's group a few years back, and I was wondering if you could just kind of tell us the thrill of playing that Mahavishnu music. I mean, I'm sure you grew up loving it anyway, and just
Sure.
to think that
Yeah.
one day you'd be on stage playing this stuff in with the man that wrote it. I mean, who would ever dream that?
That's
What
right.
an
That's
amazing
right.
feat.
I think I was 17 years old, 16, maybe 16 or 17 when I heard that record. And I would put it on the vinyl. I would put it on and I would listen to it and I'd be so amazed. And then I'd turn it to 16, half speed, to listen to get inside of it, to hear more of what they were doing. And sometimes I'd try to transcribe that stuff. But I never thought in a million years I would get to meet him and be on the same stage with John McLaughlin.
Oh yeah.
Here's a cool story. I got a lot of stories. We played 26 dates together, and I made sure that every day I was present and taking the opportunities that were given to be in conversation with him without being too much of a pest. I wanted to be close, like a fly on the wall, or actually engaged with him. And he was kind, gentle, focused, deadly serious. And one of the phrases of inspiration he gave us, he said, "Everybody sweats when they play. I want blood on the floor." And,
So
and
you
he
found the
wasn't
right
kidding,
guy.
man. He wasn't kidding. He said, you could go for anything, and as long as you're going for it, it's cool. If you mess up, don't worry about it. And I got to see that philosophy in his playing every night. For example, the third night into it, backstage, he came to me after the gig. He's still wearing his guitar, and he comes up and he said, "Man, I'm sorry, I just didn't have it together tonight." And that blew me away because, he can do no wrong
Sure.
in my ears,
Off
And
night
I
for
said,
him.
"Man, I thought you were incredible." He goes, "Thanks," And then 3 nights after that, I remember making a mistake. And I went to him and I said, "John, I'm so sorry. I should have been playing in sevens and I was playing in nines. I realized I messed that up." And he goes, "Man, I was right with you." It was so supportive and beautiful.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, what a great opportunity. He told me a bunch of stories, some about Tony Williams and Jocko and
Yeah.
the energy that they brought. He talked about his first trip to New York to meet Miles Davis through Dave Holland. Dave Holland and he were friends in London. And when McLaughlin came over, he landed in New York, got off the plane, kissed the ground, went to Harlem, and went to the club where Dave Holland invited him to meet Miles Davis. And when John got there and was to be introduced to Miles, Miles already knew who he was. And that gave him this feeling like, wow, okay, I'm here, I'm in it. And then McLaughlin said the first gig that he ever played with Miles Davis, they were jamming along. That's what it was. They called off, forget what tune it was. It's a jazz standard that you've heard a million times.
Sure.
And it was a medium tempo. And they go into it, and John's thinking, great, this is easy. I got this, no problem. And then all of a sudden, bam, he stops the group and counts off a vicious tempo. Lightning speed. And McLaughlin, she's like, oh, okay. shift gears, and he's playing, and Miles comes to him and says, take a solo. So he's playing and he's ripping, and then one by one, Miles counts the other band members out, like piano out, bass out, drums out, and it goes over to Miles. Miles goes over to John McLaughlin and says, play, and McLaughlin's there by himself, shredding a million miles an hour. The band is gone, disappeared, And after the gig, Miles came over to John and said, you know why I did that? And John said, no. Miles said, after that, you'll never be afraid. And it's so funny because when Bill Evans, the great sax player, started working with John McLaughlin in the Mahavishnu Orchestra in the 80s, he had the exact same story. Bill Evans worked with Miles, and Miles did the same thing to him. And so they shared that story between the two of them. But that was Miles' way of getting you in the fold, getting you serious, and getting you confident. And whether the band's behind you or not, you're still gonna, you're gonna bring it.
Absolutely. Well, it's almost like pulling the rug out from under you and exposing you.
Oh yeah.
There, after that, everything's going to feel comfortable in comparison.
Yeah. I remember the first time that happened to me is at Walter Mitty's Jazz Club in Virginia Highlands in Atlanta. I was with Dan Wall and Ricky Keller, and we're doing something. And this is my first time playing with this group, so I'm really nervous, so everybody has done the solo, and it comes around to my solo, and stop, and they all leave the stage. And it's like, oh, okay, it's time to tell a story. They got to do it now.
Sure. Moby Dick. No, I'm just kidding. There's no John Bonham stuff.
I did feel swallowed by a whale then.
Yeah, that's understandable. So, let's see. Tell us a bit about playing with Shawn and Jonas. Those albums that you guys did together were just stunning. And was it all? I'm guessing it wasn't all improv. I mean, there's a lot of improv in each one of those songs, but there was a certain outline that you guys had that you would use as a springboard for improvisation.
Well put. That's what it was. We had about 6 or 7 songs that we could rely on or go back to in the event that we couldn't think of something fresh and on the spot. The goal with that trio was to play a whole night of music, 100% improv, with the effect of having the audience perceive it as songs. So we would bookend the beginning and the ending, or we'd have modulations, and we were quick to react with each other, so that the appearance was that they were worked out tunes, but they'd be 20 minutes long or 30 minutes long or something. So our goal was to be 100% improv and make spontaneous compositions on stage that made sense. Sometimes we were able to do that. I think the first time we did a whole night of just that and we're happy with what we did was in Oslo, Norway. And there was one person in the crowd, and he claimed to be the world's fastest guitar player, and he was 14 years old.
Okay.
That was a trip.
Anything's possible. I've seen these kids on YouTube these days.
Yeah, but working with those guys was really eye-opening. They introduced me to a bunch of stuff, Jonas was listening to Glenn Gould, concert piano player from Canada. So I got into that stuff, and I couldn't believe the level of musicianship. He hit me to Glenn Gould. Also, Shawn Lane introduced me to Qawwali music, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, Afghanistan music, and Pakistani music that was Pakistani classical vocal music, which is some of the most acrobatic vocal music on the planet, I think. It's like Olympic sports, what they can do. It's incredible. So they opened my ears up to world music and classical music, and they also showed a fierce commitment to being in the moment and having patience. Like Shawn could develop a melody really slow and beautiful and then shred. But when he was shredding, you always heard a melody inside of all the extremely fast stuff. There was arcs, there were rainbow arcs of melodies uh, inside the shredding, so it was always musical.
I like the way you put that. Rainbow arcs of melodies. I like that.
Right, right. Instead of just
Well,
staying within a certain range, he was really expressing himself melodically.
I think a lot of fast guys just get going so fast that their fingers are doing the walking, and melody is a distant second.
Uh,
So to have somebody have the whole package is that's
yeah, because Shawn could just as easily get away from licks and riffs and just play melody and sing along with it. He would sing. Oh, excuse me. He would sing along with his playing, so that it was lyrical and melodic. But he had a good balance, and he knew when to leave a riff alone, or when to go into the shredding, and how long to take it, and then when to let it go.
he was a great pianist as well, right?
It's true.
He was into Franz Liszt and all those kind of
Absolutely, yeah.
scariest composers.
Yeah, we'd be on tour in Europe, and we'd go through a hotel lobby, and there's a grand piano there, and he's dressed like Memphis, long beard. I mean, a real standout in Europe, where everybody's real clean cut and looking, and dressed up, groomed and everything. And then Shawn Lane from Memphis comes through the lobby and sits down at the piano and just starts playing the most amazing stuff. But we got kicked out of a few places doing that.
Too many notes.
Well, I think the manager of the hotel comes into the lobby and sees Shawn looking like he just came off the street and tearing the piano up, and he didn't know what to think about it. Just asked us to leave.
Right. Yeah. Some people just don't get it.
That's all right.
So I got another question. Our mutual friend Adrian Ash is watching the show tonight. And
Hey, brother.
one of my favorite musical brothers. We've played a lot of great music together in the past 5 years.
Right on.
And dissected about every band. We were doing those tribute nights for every couple weeks. Zeppelin night, Beatles
ELO.
night, Floyd. I'm in an ELO tribute actually that came out of our ELO night. Actually, it's called Strange Magic. So keep an eye out. Hopefully, we'll get back at it once the vaccine starts to work.
I got to see them live.
Oh, really? Yeah. I caught him at Phillips a couple of years ago, and it was immaculate. I mean, it's I think they have Jeff Lynne like preserved in amber and just throw him out every once in a while when a tour comes.
When did I see them? I saw them in 1976.
Oh yeah, well that was prime time to see them.
They might have opened up for Elton John. I can't remember.
Yeah, I always had a soft spot for them ever since I was about 12. They were kind of my gateway drug to pompous progressive music, I think. Everybody has a band like that where it's not quite prog, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
Tipping point, it's like, gosh, I really like this pompous music. I need more. Oh, wait, there's lots of bands. Here's some ELP. That kind of stuff. Adrian's wondering how you perceive your own playing changing over the years.
That's a great question. It's becoming, I think, a little bit more musical. My focus now is on recording and figuring out how to be a better recording drummer, a more musical drummer, and where to put the space, where to put the density. So it's right now it's a study in the art of a drum track, or the crafting of a drum track in music. And whereas before up until this pandemic, I was on the road from 1982 until last year, and it was all live. So the live energy is, you rehearse it to a point that you can't rehearse it anymore, and you go play it, and whatever it is. But in the recording studio, especially here at the house, I can take a day or two, or I can take a week to do a drum track and go and try to better it every day. And so there's a greater amount of work going into my craft now. It's more focused than ever, and it's toward the goal of documenting a track, not just playing live and it's never heard again, but crafting something that is satisfying to listen to years from now. And so it's a new focus. That's how I've changed over the years, I think, going from more of an athletic, carefree kind of approach to a more focused and artful approach. And then there's always times to shred and practice, but when I have a client, now I'm really excited about trying to do the best I can for that song.
Yeah, it's all
so
about,
it's a less athletic and a little bit more graceful way of playing now.
Okay. I think that's something a lot of us aspire to as we age, you know, hopefully, it's like,
yeah.
And how about your kits? What are you playing currently?
I have Sonar drums, Sonar Delight. I have a blue wrap, sounds beautiful. Also have the Adrian knows he's helped me haul this drum, this drum set before. It's the Sonar designer kit. They don't make that anymore, but that's a fantastic kit. Also have a very, very small Safari, not a Safari kit, what do they call it? Sonar Martini kit. It's a tiny little bass drum. It looks like a toy, but it sounds pretty good if you tune it. If you find the sweet spot for the drums, they do sound pretty good.
Some of those little kits sound good. Actually, Adrian has one. He got his daughter, and it's tiny, and it sounds great. It's almost like you could play a little gig on that thing if you.
Yeah, it's professional. No, it's not. I take it back. It's not a totally professional kit, but it sounds good, and it gets low enough that I could teach a 6-year-old.
There you go.
And then it raises up tall enough for me to play.
Yeah.
So that's the big advantage of having that particular kit. It can fold down to a real small size.
Do you use a fairly big kit? And like, how many toms do you have?
Right now, I have a setup that's kick, snare, 2 rack toms and 2 floor toms, a ride and 2 crashes, and that's the basic.
Are there ever times you wish you had more, or is that pretty much what
I went through that when I was younger.
Yeah,
I had some massive kits, man. I remember being inspired by Happy the Man. It was a group out of Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah.
Kit Watkins.
Yeah, Frank Wyatt. And
yeah, they're drummers. They had racks with the bells and the triangles and the timpani and the bass drums sideways, and the China types and all that stuff. So I went through a lot of that, but now I realize the things that I'm most comfortable on really is a 4-piece kit. But then I expanded to a 6-piece kit. So between those two, those are my 2 workhorses.
Adrian's wondering what your shell sizes are.
They are square sizes, 10, 12, 14, and 16. And so when I tune those, I tune the heads to the tension where they'll vibrate the longest or produce the longest sustain. If you don't tune it tight enough, it won't ring. And if you tighten it too much, it'll choke itself. So there's a sweet spot where each drum head wants to be. In terms of its tension. And when you find that and it produces the longest note, and you do that to the 10, 12, 14, and 16, automatically the pitches are like dum, 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 just by the nature of those square sizes and those dimensions. And it works every single time. You find the sweet spot of the head, it's true, it'll vibrate, the drum will be its most alive. And then in relationship, it always produces those intervals or that scale.
Yeah, so it makes it all the more musical.
Yeah.
I think some guys just tune up whatever way and don't give any thought to that at all. And the results are mixed.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about I was wondering if I could just throw out some names of a few drummers and have you tell me some thoughts on them, some prog guys and some jamming fusion.
Let me preface it by saying I really don't know a whole lot. I have a few drummers that I know better.
Yeah, okay.
But I might bomb on this one.
Okay, well, just or any random memories of the band in question. How about Bill Bruford? You ever get into any of the stuff he did?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
He had his, he was in some of the best prog bands. I mean,
sure, yeah. I liked him a lot. His work with Jeff Berlin.
Yeah, those Bruford albums are some of the best fusion.
Yeah. And when I think of him and those records, I think of the snare drum sound. It must have been a metal snare, not muted, because he had a wonderful open sound to it.
He had the best pong kind of sound.
Yeah.
His snare was to die for. And then he was, back in the 70s, late 70s, very into the rotos as well. So you hear
that's right.
That
yeah.
UK album is covered with them, and that kind of stuff. And then those first 5 Yes albums are just supreme. The way he played with Chris Squire in that early Yes was unique and yet ferocious.
Yeah, truly great. Truly great. Really inspired.
Unpredictable, he kind of deliberately put things in an unexpected place.
Yeah.
And he was very much about improv. I think that's why he joined King Crimson is, Yes expected him, as he said, to pull the same rabbit out of the same hat every night while they toured stadiums and whatever. And he's like, I'm out of here. I've got to go to musical waters that excite.
But it was more than that too. I think he was left out of the publishing, so that why stay in a group where you're the workhorse?
Right. It's enough to make you name a band after yourself and start writing. I'm not going to go through this again. Yep.
Learn. Yeah, I love Bill Bruford. Fantastic.
I've got a couple more questions about the sizes of your drums. How about the bass drum and the snare?
Right. The current setup is 22-inch bass drum that gives me a big enough drum that I can get some subs. Anything smaller than a 22, I don't really get that full impact of the bass.
Right.
The snare drums, I alternate between well, I have a Sonar, I guess it's 4-inch deep, 14, and it's Bell Bronze. It's super heavy. That's the nicest snare drum that I own, and I can tune it super tight, but it still has some body to it. But it's that drum produces a bounce like no other. If I just drop the stick on it, it'll get a whole lot more bounces just because it's such a quality drum. So I like that one for the tight, crisp, high-end stuff. And then I use a Gretsch, the same drum I used on the earlier Aquarium Rescue Unit albums with Bruce Hampton, the live one. Mm-hmm. The Gretsch drum, it's 8-inch deep by 14, so it's a real big drum. And I can crank that super tight, both bottom and top head, and get a nice snap and a good bounce, but it gets a lower tone. So I use that on the rock stuff or the beefier stuff. Mm-hmm. And between the two, I can cover most genres.
Very cool. Okay. A few more drummer questions. How about Stuart Copeland?
Yeah, fantastic. I love his hi-hat work, and talk about crisp, on the money. He's snappy, I enjoy those style drummers who sound crisp, for lack of a better word.
That really made the Police stand out when they broke through on radio. It's like nobody had a drum sound like that at the time,
Right. And the phrasing was really interesting too, because it was coming from rock, coming from ska. So it was kind of a new genre for the pop world. It was danceable because it was 4 on the floor, but the hi-hat work was really intricate.
Oh yeah.
And the backbeat stuff was different, different sounds and different placements. Yeah, love him.
For a pop guy, he's very aware.
Just great.
A lot going on there.
Yeah, here's another drummer. Yeah, go ahead.
How about Lenny White? You get into that Return to Forever stuff?
Yeah, man, for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, fantastic. He was one of my first heroes for sure in high school.
I think he kind of gets lumped in there with Cobham, but they're pretty different. I think Billy's.
Oh yeah, they're different for sure.
A little more off the chain. I think Lenny was a little more refined in his delivery sometimes.
Yeah, I think they had the jazz upbringing, the traditional jazz upbringing, but then they also recorded the worked in the R&B backbeat world as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cobham took it to an Olympic level in terms of just physicality of the drum set. Lenny White always to me was very smooth and very hip, always very appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. How about Michael Walden? You know, the one that followed Cobham and Mahavishnu. He was a little tidier, I guess is the first word I'd use. Does that make sense?
Another super crisp drummer and musician. He plays every instrument.
Yeah,
has a great ear for production.
Producer, yeah. You know,
and the same kind of spiritual inclinations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think him and Cobham get lumped together because they were both in Mahavishnu, but they're quite different. And really, the albums that they're on are different too. I think Visions of the Emerald with Michael Walden is just a little more refined than the earlier ones. You know, I mean, it's similar.
Yeah. Well, you know, McLaughlin is raw, so all of his albums are going to be raw because he's raw.
Oh yeah, and the Mahavishnu in particular, I think, was maybe one of his rawest phases. You know, because
oh yeah, man, they were out for blood. They got it.
Yeah,
they spilled it every night.
Yeah,
for sure. And you know, spilling blood, there's nothing tidy about that.
No.
Yeah, you know, but Michael Walden has ferocious chops and great ideas and a willingness to express himself on a different level. Like he really took his time, and it was thematic and very compositional, and above all, just really took his time with it. He was supportive of the music, always hit the right stuff, always left the right spaces. But when it was time to do a fill or feature, it was mind-blowing. Also, Michael Walden's solo records back in the day mostly were on the pop side, but there was always one track on each record that was going for it.
Melt your face.
Melt your face, and I always enjoyed searching for that track. You know.
Speaking of pop guys, what do you think of Phil Collins?
Oh, fantastic! You know, people have talked about him being the Cobham of England back in the day. He was the same, some of the same licks, and really going for it. His work with Brand X, I liked a lot too.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people.
He owns the Alamo gift shop.
The Alamo gift shop?
Yep. Phil Collins is an Alamo historian.
I know he's an Alamo historian, and I know Ozzy peed on it, but I don't remember much else. He got arrested for that, as he should be. No, I knew he was an Alamo enthusiast, but I didn't realize he owned a gift shop too. That's
I heard a story that he feels like he was reincarnated. He was there, He was there at the Alamo. He felt.
I could think of a few of the songs he did with Genesis that have a kind of a Western theme. There's a song, Ballad of Big, on there, and then there are 3 albums totally about going out on the dusty trail and shooting some hombres. Another guy I wanted to ask you about. Hold on a second. How about the guy from Little Feat? I'm trying to remember his name. Richie Hayward. Yeah, man. They had such an interesting groove. That kind of New Orleans kind of thing mixed in there really set them apart.
Yeah, I got to know him before he passed away, and he was a beautiful cat. I have some really, really great memories with him. He came out to join us when we were doing the Zombieland Orchestra events in Atlanta, excuse me. My wife Rainbow and I put on a series of holiday around Christmas time. We put on the Zombieland Orchestra shows, and he came out a couple times for that. Getting to know him was wonderful, and I met him through excuse me, but yeah, he's somebody I really admire because it's always a feel-good thing, and it's not pattern oriented. It's pattern and variation. So no 2 bars are the same, and there's always a sweet spot in every song where you go, oh my God, did he really just do that? And it might be a space where he just didn't play anything at all, but he was very musical, loved his grooves. He was like one of one of the drummers I loved listening to that didn't play jazz that I really admired, along with like Levon Helm. Those two cats, you know, they're so musical, so beautiful. You could, they're textbook examples of how to play a song and make it feel really good.
Sure, that's the goal, hopefully.
But they were so good at it, so natural at it. It didn't seem like they were trying at all.
What do you think of
Maybe
Jeff?
that's the key. Don't try so hard.
What do you think of Jeff Porcaro?
Love him. Love him. Yeah. Fantastic. An innovator and one of those really precise drummers because he grew up. His dad was a great musician and his family. He grew up in the studio, so he was really born for that. I remember the first time I heard him and really understanding it for what it was, Steely Dan's Katie Lied album.
Yeah, he was like 18 on that or something.
I heard he was a teenager, 17 or 18.
Yeah, like that tune, Your Gold Teeth #2. And that's a straight up fusion tune almost until it breaks into the vocal part.
Yeah.
There's some fantastic drumming. I've actually had the pleasure of covering most of those Steely albums with Adrian. He does a Steely Dan night every year at the Velvet Note. And about 5 years ago, we started at Asia and started working our way backwards. And we got all the way through to Countdown to Ecstasy. So done most all of them now. And it's been really fun digging into those deep tracks that nobody ever pays any attention to because there's genius rolled up in every one of those, you know. So
absolutely, man.
And Steely, you know, they had so many great drummers, you know, Bernard Purdy, of course, but you know, Jeff, Jim Keltner, you know, he's on stuff like Josie and some of those other well-known tunes.
Yeah.
And Rick Marotta on Peg. Yeah. So many amazing.
Yeah.
On that, you know.
Well, that's a university right there.
Yeah, I know. Anybody would give everything to have Steely Dan on their resume back in those days. You know, it's like the top of the pop, pretty much. You know. So
another drummer that played with Steely Dan later on, Peter Erskine.
Oh yeah,
one of my favorites for a long time.
The reunion tour in '93. That's the first time they toured since '74, and he's the guy they call. Oh yeah, and he's great at everything. You know, with Weather Report, you know, he's always fantastic. And he played with the Brecker Brothers as well. I feel like he was. You know that album Heavy Metal Bebop?
That's Terry Bozzio.
Oh, Terry Bozzio, you're right. Okay, there we go. There's another guy. The Zappa drummers, that's another ball of wax, you know, Terry and Vinnie Caliuta and Chester Thompson. Wow. We can talk another night about all that, definitely.
Let's do.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, listen, we probably should wrap it up tonight, but Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to stop and
thank you.
Your musical evolution. It's done some amazing music along the way, and I'm excited to hear what you do next.
Well, thank you so much, and blessings to you in this year. Stay centered, wear your mask, wash your hands, keep the bugs away.
I'm about to go to the store now, and I will dress accordingly.
Put your hazmat suit on. And
exactly. Put me down.
Blessings.
Well, Tuesday afternoon, I will be jamming with speaking with Alan White of Yes, Tony Levin, and David Torn. They'll be dropping by to talk about their all improvised album they put out 10 years ago that's coming back out, reissued on vinyl. So that'll be pretty cool. So stay tuned, everybody, and we'll do it again next week. All right. Take care, Jeff. Hope to see you sometime in the flesh sometime next year. So,
time is free.
Love it. Absolutely. You got it. All right. Well, take care, everybody. Have a good week.
See you all later.
All right. Take care.